Hi everyone, this is Anna Sawyer from Trada. Welcome to the webinar, Dynamic Keyword Insertion, Ninja PPC. So today we are going to go really deep on a topic that we absolutely love, but we're going to do it very quickly. And we're going to have you out of here in probably about 30 minutes. So I'm just going to go over a couple of logistics before we get started. There will absolutely be a recording and slides and a guide to dynamic keyword insertion shared with you after the webinar. We usually send these out to you tomorrow morning. If you would like to tweet, we would like to encourage your tweeting. The hashtag is NinjaPPC. If you have any questions, please just type them right into the chat box as you think of them, and we will answer them at the end. And if you see a user responding to you named Danny Randa, this is our awesome Trada marketing intern, and he will be able to answer any questions that you might have. So let's get started. I am joined today by Brandon Hess, who is my colleague here at Trada. He has many years of search experience and has lots of things to say about dynamic keyword insertion. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
So let's get started. We're going to talk about the basics of dynamic keyword insertion. So this is an awesome ninja trick, and part of the reason that we call it a ninja trick is because it's sort of one of those moment to learn, lifetime to master kind of things, much like the game Go. And also because it can really, make your campaign really, really powerful. So dynamic keyword insertion, let me go back here. Dynamic keyword insertion is the practice of using variables in search ads to allow a user's exact search term to show within the ad. So, okay, what does that really mean? It means that you use an awesome, fancy ninja trick and you write just one ad, and it's like you wrote an ad for every keyword. So, Brandon, can you talk a little bit about why this is a good thing?
Well, a lot of times, and this kind of goes back to how search works in its effect, is that you have a lot of things regarding how your ad stands out amongst the other 9 people you're competing against, right? So when you look at an ad and you're trying to compete against maybe several keywords, maybe you have 10 keywords, they're all the same topic, but maybe they're different. That ad can stand out to each one of those people a little bit more independently versus just one ad showing for 10 different keywords.
Yeah, so in many ways, it just saves you time. And when a user sees the exact search term in an ad, it tends to boost click-through rate. And when you use dynamic keyword insertion, it actually bolds the search term, which just makes the ad seem really relevant. It makes it seem really tight. And it has the ability to serve an ad that speaks directly to a user. So if you're typing something in and you see exactly that term in the ad, you're more likely to click. So it's cool. Let's talk about how we do it. There are going to be a lot of funny ninja slides in here because we love ninjas here at Trada.
A little bit of passion of ours.
All right, so there are 4 major elements of a dynamic keyword insertion ad. So we are going to assume that you have a reasonable basis of search marketing. So the things that we're going to talk about here are the ad group. So in this example, we are going to be doing an ad group around the Japanese swords called katanas. Katanas are swords that ninjas tend to favor. And the keywords in the ad group. So as you can see, these are really, really closely related. Now, we always suggest that when you build ad groups, you build ad groups with keywords that are very closely related.
Right, and this kind of shows already kind of the reasons you start to use that, right? If you have an ad group about katanas, but you have different types of katanas in that ad group, depending on the search, that person might be looking for a specific type, not just a general katana or not even just a samurai katana, but more of a Japanese katana. And that can insert that ad with that very relevant term to make them more likely to click, more likely to notice it standing out from the other people.
The idea here is you can't necessarily predict how people are going to search for things. Right. Now, one thing I want to point out about this ad group is that all of the keywords in it are the same part of speech. They're all nouns, and you'll see soon why that's very important. So the next step is to choose your default keyword. Now, in this case, we've chosen the default keyword to be just the word katanas. Brandon, can you talk a little bit about how you should choose your default keyword?
Right, and so this sort of gets into sort of the limits that you get imposed on you by both Google and Bing, right? You can only use so many characters in your ads, right, to save space. So when you're choosing a default, you want the default to be very, not generic, but to speak well across the ad if that search term they put in just can't fit in the title. And that's really the first use case for it. You want to make sure that you have sort of a filler in there, because if they type in such a long keyword in the first place, it won't fit in that title, and you need something that still makes sense that gets replaced for that. So.
Yeah, I would say just choose sort of the one that, I think you said it right, sort of broadly speaks for the other keywords in the ad group.
Right.
So then you write your ad in this format. I'm just going to let you guys take a look at that for a second, but we're going to go deep on it in just a second. So we're going to talk about what we actually did here. So you use the default keyword as a variable, and you place it in these curly braces. So that's the punctuation that looks like a mustache. And you can see that we've actually put the word keyword right before the word katanas.
Right, we'll dig into what that keyword means as well, too. There's some syntax we want to talk about, and we'll get deeper into that later in the presentation as well.
Yep, so putting the word keyword along with your default keyword in those curly brace mustaches. And we're going to take a second here to talk a little bit about a topic that's really near and dear to our hearts here. It is, do ninjas have mustaches?
It is a fact that if you've read Dr. McNinja, his father has a mustache, a very powerful mustache, in fact. It's something that he derives a lot of his powers from, potentially. So.
And in the truly terrible movie American Ninja 2, the American Ninja had a mustache, but it's like not even bad funny. It's just bad. I think maybe sort of one thing that we should think about, though, is that ninjas are shrouded in mystery, so who knows what they have on their faces?
Right, and there seems to only be a small amount of ninjas that have mustaches, so maybe it's some sort of showcase that they're unique.
Yep. Anyway, back to DKI. So we're gonna talk about. So if you can see here, we've written our ad with our default keyword in it. But remember that we have some other keywords in our ad group. So this was our default, but what happens when people enter the other keywords? So if a user enters their default keyword, katanas, their ad will look like this. Up to 50% off katanas. Free shipping on a huge selection of authentic katanas. This is if people typed in katanas. But if they typed in any of those other keywords in the ad group, it just magically puts the keyword in. And as you can see, it bolds it. So you can see it's really kind of popping off the screen right now.
Right, this is kind of the inherent power of that right there, is that you can start to see how, it still goes back to your ad group. You need to make sure that your ad group still makes sense with the ad, right? You wouldn't want to have katanas and ninja stars in the same ad group, because suddenly your text might have to change because there might be a different offer or a different message you'd want to put within that ad. So it still showcases why, to Anna's very good point, of having a very tight, relevant ad group that's only about one or a shared topic.
Awesome. So we're just going to go back and talk about why this is good again. When a user sees the exact search term in an ad, it tends to boost click-through rate. And also, it saves you time because you don't have to write an ad for every keyword. Now, some people would say that this is lazy search marketing. And the truth is, if you don't do it correctly, it can be. And it can it can cause you some problems.
Right, because when we still look at Google, as an instance, they still take into account quality score, and we won't dig too much into that given the time, but they still want to rate your ads and your keywords and the site you send it to based on how relevant it is to each other. So if you get lazy on this, and your ads and your keywords and your landing page start not matching up in a relevant fashion, you can start having problems, just on the basic level of having to pay more for these ads than you would if you did it correctly.
So I'm going to just go ahead and preemptively answer a few of the questions that you probably have. I see that a lot of questions are rolling in. We will get to as many as we can afterwards. But we're going to talk about just a few of them that we just, using our ninja prescience, assumed that you guys would ask. One of them is, can I use dynamic keyword insertion in just one line of my ad, like the headline? And the answer is absolutely. We were just using the example of, a lot of big retailers like eBay do this a lot. They use dynamic keyword insertion in many of the lines of the ad, which, makes everything super, super relevant, including the display URL. But absolutely, you can use it just in the headline. You can use it really anywhere in the ad.
And the more you use, the more you have to sort of plan out, try to get an estimate around what keywords those are going to be, right? So you'll have to sort of plan out, will these even fit in these areas, right? If you try to put them too short on a sentence where there's only room for one word, you want to kind of take into account what words might get put in there. So is it even worth your time if you have katanas, but Japanese katanas might be in that last word in the sentence where there's no characters to fit? So there's some planning involved in that, but yeah, definitely you want to just be able to use it one in your headline. That's more than possible.
Yeah, and keep in mind that you want the ad to be readable. All right, we don't want to fall down the, dark hole of, trying to make it so keyword rich that it's not readable. That's never good.
Right. No, that's a good point.
So here's another question. What happens when I use dynamic keyword insertion with broad match keywords? All right, we're going to talk about this in great depth later, but basically you should watch out.
So Google will try to match it to the term you entered in as the broad match term generally, but you still want to watch out because what people can search for on a broad set can be much different than what you're bidding on. And like Anna said, we'll get into this a little later on. But
what if the search query is too long to fit within the character limit? The ad is just going to go ahead and show your default keyword. This is why you choose a default. And this one is a very popular question. How does dynamic keyword insertion affect quality score? So, two different answers here. One, for Google it actually doesn't directly affect it, but it has been shown to increase click-through rate. And as we know, click-through rate is really, really, a heavy contender when it comes to quality score. Obviously, because Google wants to make money, they want to reward advertisers who are getting lots of clicks. And that's good for quality score. When it comes to the Search Alliance, they've actually said that it can increase quality score. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the Search Alliance differs from Google. They do things just a little bit differently over there.
yeah, because Bing just recently pushed out quality score. They didn't have it until the last 2 months or so. So this is a pretty new thing for Bing.
So I actually just saw a question pop up that I'm going to answer right now. It was, what is the Search Alliance? The Search Alliance is the Yahoo Bing Search Alliance. So Yahoo and Bing are still separate search engines, but they actually run through the same back end. And that happened just about exactly a year ago.
Yeah, just about a year ago this month.
Yeah. So it actually means that when you are advertising in Yahoo and Bing, you advertise on one back end. So what's the deal with capitalization? Now, we always suggest that you use title casing in your ads because title casing has also been proven to increase click-through rate. So there are a few different ways that you can enter your keyword, but if you enter with a capital K, capital W, it will automatically title case any search term that's entered. You could probably just do all caps keyword, but then you would be likely to have your ad be rejected. You could do all lowercase, but we always just suggest using title casing.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain reasons to use the caps one if it's a trademark term or an acronym, but it's very rarely used in keyword insertion just because you have to really predict what those keywords are going to be.
So let's talk about proceeding with caution. All right, so it can be easy to make mistakes. The fundamental issue here is you're basically trusting a robot to write ads for you. And part of the reason that we write ads, and that we hire creative people to write ads for us is because we want to stand out from the crowd, in a positive way, not in a robot wrote this ad kind of way.
And ninjas hate robots, which is important.
They do. They're natural enemies. That's true. So here are some things that can go wrong if you poorly execute DKI. On the top we have just a sort of part of speech snafu. We have here, buy swords instead of swords. This is a verb as opposed to a noun, and so we're saying, free shipping on huge selection of authentic buy swords. This is why we don't put swords and buy swords into the same ad group. And this is an actual real one down below, looking for brains. Save on brains. A zombie, also a natural enemy of the ninja.
Right.
Yeah. So you want to be careful when you're doing dynamic keyword insertion. And here's how to prevent yourself from looking like an idiot. Now, even if you aren't using dynamic keyword insertion, you should be keeping your ads really small, or your ad groups really small.
Right, and I think that's the important part of dynamic keyword insertion. It quickly showcases how well your ad groups are put together, right? So if your ad groups are very tight and small and you have control over the keywords, those dynamic keyword insertions is going to show that. Now, if you have a very loose ad group where it's just hundreds of keywords that aren't really relevant, suddenly those ads are going to showcase how poorly you're doing on an ad group level. So just keep that in mind. The better work you do on the ad group, the better your DKI will work.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, if some of your enemies are looking at your ads and seeing that you're obviously using DKI, they're just going to shake their heads sadly and then, eat you. So here are some ways to, again, prevent yourself from looking like an idiot. Use negative keywords. Use them a lot, especially if you're using broad match. So, Brandon, you can probably more eloquently talk a little bit about what negative keywords are.
Yeah, so I mean, to Anna's point, broad match, now this is, we'll talk about this later, but if you are using broad match terms and with ads that have dynamic keyword insertion, what broad match terms means is you don't exactly know what they're going to put in front of it. It might be very similar to that keyword. So sometimes they may search for something and that ad shows up not as relevantly. So you want to kind of look at the negatives and go, you know what, for my ads, if I'm searching for katanas but someone searches free katanas, well, that might not be relevant if they're looking for a free katana and I'm not talking it's 50% off, shipping. So you'd want to add the word free as a negative. That tells Google and Bing that anytime a user searches this term but has the word free in their search query, I don't want my ad to show.
And here's a great way to find out what people are actually searching for that are triggering your dynamic keyword ads. This also helps you brainstorm negative. So say, for example, that you're selling katanas and somebody's searching for how to hold a katana or,
pirate katanas.
Video of katana fight. These are all totally irrelevant to you. So you should really be always cultivating that list of negatives. And then, of course, be careful with broad match. Now, we are going to talk about broad match for a while. So this is one of my favorite concepts. Ninjas believe in free will. We are not like samurai. Samurai have all these rules and regulations and honor codes, meetings, blah, blah, blah.
Statements.
Yeah, mission statements.
Right.
But ninjas believe in do what you will. And, when it comes to search marketing, a lot of times there aren't hard and fast rules. So we don't want to tell you don't use broad match, okay? We just want to tell you if you're going to use broad match, be super, super, super careful. So here are some of the things that you should definitely talk about when doing broad match. So definitely use negatives. We already talked about that, especially for things like sucks. What if somebody is typing in trot a sword suck? You don't want that to be dynamically inserted into your ad. That just looks terrible. Right. Brandon, you can talk a little bit about avoiding competitors' terms.
Right, and that's another thing too. Broad match again. Broad match is used because you want to attract as many of those search terms around that term as you can. So if you have an ad group about competitors' terms and suddenly you're inserting a competitor's name into your ad that might be trademarked, it goes back to what we talked about earlier on. You still have to go against Google's policies to say, Google doesn't allow an ad to show up if it has a trademark term that you don't own. Suddenly you have a competitor's term and you're shutting down all your ads. So that's a big thing too with broad match. You really want to know what you're putting in there.
Plus, if you're putting your competitor's term into your ad, you're kind of advertising for your competitor.
Right.
Just not super smart. Don't use with ad extensions.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, ad extensions too. There's if you're familiar with ad extensions, there's a lot of options in Google that you can add certain things to your ad, like your phone number, your address, your product image, all of those things, and that starts to get a little bit wonky too. If your product image is always going to be a certain item, like a ninja star, and you throw in DKI with a katana word, that's not going to make any sense, right? Even if the ad topic or ad copy changes dynamically, but that image doesn't. Suddenly you have an image of your ninja star, but it's about a katana.
Right. Good point. Don't confuse them. And then, I know we said that there's no ninja code, but ninjas are smart. So just don't use single word broad match keywords. That's crazy. That's you might not survive the night kind of stuff. And again, always be testing. This is again something that doesn't necessarily apply to dynamic keyword insertion. You should always be testing things. Test for a conversion rate. See if dynamic keyword insertion is actually working for you.
Right. I saw a question pop up that I can just meet right now too. Regarding Google, Google will only put in the text you are bidding on. And where it gets weird is that with a broad match, that might not be what they search. So selling your ad doesn't make as much sense, right? And that's where you want to get careful with that, is that with broad match, you don't exactly know what the query is. Phrase, you're a little bit more exact, and exact, you're completely on, right? So with a broad match term, on the Google side, yeah, they'll put in the term you bid on, but now it doesn't really match up as well, right? So that's where you want to get careful.
All right, so we're gonna zoom through the rest here because it looks like we are, running a little low on time after all of our ninja jokes. So here's a tip. Just really completely try and understand what broad match allows before you run a broad match DKI campaign. Just, make sure that you fully understand it before you see what you're getting yourself into. So let's talk about some ninja tips. Number one, research your competitors' ads. Are they all using dynamic keyword insertion? If so, maybe you shouldn't be using dynamic keyword insertion. Here's an example. Go type in running shoes or something, and pretty much everything you're going to see on the right-hand side over there is going to be big, companies names of big companies.
Oh, right, like
Overstock.com and
Amazon
shoes.com and Amazon, and they're all going to be using dynamic keyword insertion. So if you are a smaller shoe retailer, maybe you should try writing some witty, entertaining, interesting ad copy of your own. Maybe this is the time when you shouldn't use it.
Yeah, and it goes back to Anna's point of you can get kind of reliant on this, and sometimes it's not always the best option. Sometimes what makes you stand out is being a little bit more custom, right, where you're writing your own ads for each keyword, and that's not a bad thing either. It's just knowing when to use it.
And remember to drive traffic to a relevant landing page. So this is tricky because you're allowing your dynamic keyword insertion to add a whole bunch of keywords in. So the best way to do this is to keep your ad group really tight and relevant. Right,
because this also goes to the point too. Bing and Google allow you to use these things in a dynamic way for your destination display URLs, right? So if you're using it that deep and you start to have pages that just don't match up relevantly, you got to be really, really cognizant of that.
And use negatives to keep your offer honest. So the idea here is basically if you're not using cheap, discounted, and free as negatives, and you are selling things that aren't cheap, discounted, and free, people are going to click on your ad looking for cheap, discounted, and free, find out when they get to the other side that they have to pay for things, and immediately bounce off, which is going to increase your bounce rate. And finally, optimize for clicks.
Right. A very typical way you'll see DKI used is that someone will have an ad group with maybe two ads with DKI in it and then two ads that are standard. And what you want to do is let sort of the users decide. If they're clicking more on the ones, if the click-through rate's higher on another ad that doesn't use DKI, you want Google to show that one more, right? So there's a setting in your advanced settings in Google that you can say, I want my ads to show based on which one gets clicked more.
Great. And finally, just be smart. Use your noodle. A smart ninja is a ninja who is still alive. That's a real ninja quote.
That's a very
beautiful,
very deep,
isn't it? So now we're going to take, before we get to our questions, we're going to take just 2 minutes to talk about Strata, and then we will answer all your questions. So, what is Strata? Strata is the world's first and only crowdsourced search marketing marketplace. It's like having a huge dedicated ninja team, and it actually doesn't cost any more than if you were to learn all of the tricks and do this yourself.
An army of ninjas.
An army of ninjas. Except that they're actually like, search marketing experts. Don't worry, they're not actual ninjas. So we have this large global crowd of certified paid search experts, and they do SEM for you. They work on campaigns at the same time, and because of that, you get this great diversity of thinking because there are multiples of them. They have time to constantly optimize, and you can run on multiple ad networks all through the same API. And most importantly, they already know all the dynamic keyword insertion tricks. They've already worked for companies like yours. They've already worked in your vertical. Collectively, they all work together, and they're paid based on performance. So actually the way it works is there are no fees to use Strata, no startup fees, no management fees. This crowd of experts applies to work on your campaign, and then if they can optimize below prices that you set, they keep that difference. So you can get started right away. If anyone is interested in a Strata demo, please just chat Danny Randa, and he will set that up for you. So let's get to the questions. We have a lot of questions. I told you guys that we would do this in 30 minutes, and we have about 5 minutes left. We'll probably, I know, thank you. We'll probably go a little bit over that, so feel free to drop off. But at the same time, I want to get to as many questions as I possibly can. So I am going to actually hand this first one off to Brandon just so I can start to tally up the questions that you guys have been chatting in. So one question, whose name I forgot to write down, says, what about bidding on typos? And how does that work with dynamic keyword insertion?
Well, so typos, that gets into a little bit of decisions around on your part. Do you want ads for your domain to show up with typos in them, right? And you want to kind of do some research and know, hey, say like you have a brand name that's easily misspelled, right? Maybe you made up a brand name or a product name that you're bidding on. And that's a common reason we see it, right? If it's just a very complicated name to remember, like you use a Q without a U or something like that, that is more than acceptable, right? Because you want to capture those people that maybe don't know how to spell your brand, but you can tell that they're looking for it. What you don't want to do is try to just go after every keyword combination possible without thinking about what that might do to your brand, right? If you constantly have ads with misspellings, one thing is, if you do it too much, Google can start giving you policy errors, right? Because they still take into account that grammatical editorial guidelines for your ad. Same with Bing now. So you want to keep that in mind. You know, misspellings is fine if it's a trademark term or a product name, but if it's an actual word and you constantly have your ads full of typos, you run out of the chance that Google's going to shut that ad down if it's constantly coming up like that.
And it just doesn't look good to have a misspelling in your ad.
Right.
Like,
right.
That just doesn't look good. I mean, we always suggest that you bid on misspellings because people have clumsy fingers, but, I mean, I wouldn't suggest using it with dynamic keyword insertion.
And these are infamous, well-spelled people.
Yeah. Some of us are allergic to typos.
Right.
So Liz wants to know, what if the display URL created is not a working link and someone tries to type it in?
That is a great question. So display URLs by default, they don't have to be a real page that exists, right? So the display URL and the destination URL, you need to always make sure you understand that difference. The destination URL has to be a real page and has to match the top level domain that your display URL shows. So anything after that domain can be just a keyword you put in there because you can use that to build relevance. So now if they type that in, some people try to consider that, right? Because there are people that might not click on an ad and just try to go to that display URL. That's a very low percentage, but there are people that will try to have a good 404 page on their site that knows what they're looking for. But it's a pretty low common issue to see. But again, you want to make sure that the display URL only matches the domain that your destination goes to, because that's another Google policy where they have to match up. You can't say you're going to shop.com and then send them to shopnow.com or something like that.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. So I'm getting a lot of questions about dynamic keyword insertion and what are the rules around exceeding the ad line character limit. So if you can go ahead and I'm writing down questions.
Right. So yeah, again, that's exactly why you use that default words. Like you would have the keyword in your the variable that says keyword : katanas. That word would fit. And you have to plan that out too, because if it exceeds the character limit on that line, the ad will go back to whatever you put in as the default text. It'll never go longer than that character limit. So yeah, that's exactly why you use that character, the default character in your keyword insertion.
Awesome. So for Lauren here, I'm just going to clarify something that we talked about earlier. She says, I was under the impression that the only text that would show in an ad would be something that you are actually bidding on as a keyword. Is this not the case? The trot a sword suck example threw me off. So what we were talking about here is using broad match keywords along with dynamic keyword insertion. So the way broad match keywords work is they allow the search network to decide if other variations of that keyword that people type in are close to your keyword, and they will allow those keywords to trigger an ad. And broad match keywords are very, very liberal. So they could use not only just your keyword plus other words or your keyword minus certain words, but also synonyms of your keyword. So this can just kind of get a little bit tricky.
Right. You just want to know, broad match, as we said, we don't want to tell you what to do, but I mean, we always would advise avoid using broad match for DKI. Even if you read the Google advertising policies, they say the same thing, that you should always use exact match first for that, because of that same problem. Then you know exactly why your ad's coming up, what they searched for to bring it up. Even though you're bidding on a word from broad match, they might have put any number of things in there around it or before it or a synonym of it that might make the entire reason they search for it different than what you're implying in your ad.
Exactly. And with dynamic keyword insertion, it just makes it more public. It actually makes an ad with that in it. So with our trot a sword suck example, with broad match, if you just typed in, or if you were bidding on the keyword trot a swords, they might allow trot a sword suck as one of the keywords they would let your ad appear for. So if you use the negative keyword suck, then your ad won't be able to show for trot a sword suck. So I hope I was clear enough on that. You can go ahead and chat us back, or we can continue the conversation offline if we didn't answer it. So Ike wants to know, does it matter if the keyword is pluralized? And I believe he's talking about the default keyword.
Oh, so I mean, depending on how you're asking that, I mean, if the default keyword in your keyword insertion is pluralized, but you bid on a term that's not, right? So that kind of goes back to even what Anna talked about. You want your ad groups to be very similar. So you want to have an ad group that's just the plural versions on exact or the singular versions, so that the dynamic keyword makes sense in the ad copy, right? Because the ad needs to read well still. So if you're going to be inserting a plural word when the sentence implies a singular, that might make your ad read a little odd, right? So that you want to keep that in mind. Yeah, plural and singular, if you're doing exact match, will matter. Broad match goes back to my point. If you're bidding on a word that's singular, but because it's broad match, they searched a plural version of that, your ad doesn't make as much sense possibly.
Thanks, Brandon. Okay, awesome question from Claire. Can you put the competitor's name or brand in your negative keywords?
Yeah, you can add. So you can say that I don't want my ads to show when someone says Acme katanas because I don't want to show up because they're not looking for my product. You can say that you don't want your ads to show for any term, right? So negatives can be very loose, and what that saves you is that pain of spending a click or even an impression. Even though you're not paying for impressions on these, it does use up some of your available. So you want to be very smart on your negatives and make sure that you don't want to be showing up for your competitors' terms. Now, there are research shows that in certain categories, advertising against your competitor can work pretty well because if their prices are more expensive than yours, you give that option for them to learn that. But yeah, you're more than able to add competitors' terms to your negative list.
Awesome. So Brandon, can you expand a little bit on how this works in Ad Center? We should have been a little bit more inclusive and talk about Ad Center as well, because you can do dynamic keyword insertion in Ad Center, but it just works a little bit differently there.
Yeah, and they call it dynamic ad text, and they also have a few other options that Google doesn't have. They're called params, 1, 2, and 3. I won't get too far into that, but the param option that they allow adds a little bit of flexibility into how you can add keywords to your destination URL, how you can actually pick dynamically which keywords out of a hat, basically. So it goes back to on the Bing side, if you have an ad group of 20 keywords and they're all similar, but you have and this is using actually the Ad Center, say you're selling chocolates. You might have different flavors of that chocolate, but you only want 3 of those ads to show up, even though you have 20 different flavors in your ad group. You can say in param 2, let's make this mint, and let's make param 3 chocolate chip chocolate. Or chocolate, that doesn't make sense. Vanilla chocolate. So you can select which keywords you want to show up in there at what point, and then all other instances would be the default. So it's a little bit more of advanced targeting, and it's actually pretty helpful, but the params get a little advanced, and we can always answer that question a little deeper online or offline too. But
can I just say that Brandon is really good at answering questions?
Thank you.
You really are.
Thank you very much. I've been training.
We're running a little short on time, so I am going to wrap this up with a couple questions. This one sounds tricky, so it's for Brandon. Nick wants to know, I've seen DKI ads not use the default keyword and instead use a keyword from another group. Oh, I lost it.
Oh, that's bad.
From another group that has a high CTR. How do you stop this? Brandon, do you know?
So the ads that use the default keyword instead use a keyword from another group that has a high CTR.
I think we might need some more information.
Yeah, I'm sorry too. I kind of get where they add, but I don't exactly understand the from another group that has a high CTR.
Nick, I'd love to take this question offline. If you want to just email me right there, Anna@Trada.com. I will have a little powwow with Brandon later, and we'll try and get back to you about this, because I'm not sure we have quite enough context around this, and I'm not sure we have time to oh, he said sure. Okay, great. So here's the final question. Where did it go? Chad wants to know, this is a question about Trada. Chad wants to know, does Trada use my AdWords account or an independent one?
We use our own MCC, which is a client control center. So we don't use your existing AdWords account. We do allow you to provide us additional information based on your historic campaign data, but we use our own agency account. So we basically would be starting over a new campaign.
Awesome. Everyone, we've really, really enjoyed having you. I hope you've enjoyed our Dynamic Keyword Insertion webinar, where we talked mostly about ninjas and a little bit about Dynamic Keyword Insertion. We will absolutely be sharing a recording and a guide and the slides and anything else you might want. We usually email them out tomorrow, so you'll all be getting that. And if you have any more questions, we like to talk to you, so just email me.
Yeah.
Or, you can call me on my personal home phone.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not that.
Oh.
But yeah, great. So we will be having another webinar on July 21st, and I will send out the link to that in the follow-up email. So, everyone, thanks so much. Brandon, thanks for being here.
Oh, no problem. You all are awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, and this is the end of the webinar.
Perfect.